Serious doctors, have you ever wanted to refuse a patient? What did he/she do? Yeah, drug seekers who get really mean and nasty, and in my face, yelling at me, insulting my intelligence and education, gawked out on who know what legal pills and illegal substances. Those people ruin my day. I add fuel to the fire by refusing to give them any more narcotics. Yep. Currently discharging a patient for forging disability paperwork and faking my signature on the form. DHS, Depth of Human Services, hilariously contacted my office requesting that I sign it myself rather than having the patient do it for me, as if she had my consent to commit fraud. I'm a nurse at an allergy and immunology clinic. Since we are not a NER, we have the right to refuse patients. Most people are asked to leave simply because they are being assholes to the staff. People can get really angry and abusive about their bills. In my time, I have seen maybe 5 patients terminated for their inappropriate behavior. More often, the most interesting folks we turn away are not even patients. For a long time, we had a nice homeless man who would come in at least once a week in a tattered fake ups uniform and ask if we had any packages. We would always tell him we did not, and he would quietly take a fistful of lollipops from the front desk and leave. We eventually had to tip off the building manager as patients were complaining, but I think about him every so often. I truly hope that somewhere, someone is providing him with candy. Drug seekers like the rest have said, but there was one that stood out in my memory. A lady who was triggered as green on a particularly busy night. Green is usually non-life-threatening things that can wait a few hours before being seen. Grew impatient after a few hours of waiting. She stormed into our work area, the door connecting us to the waiting room, and started yelling at everyone why she was still waiting. One of the nurses approached her to calm her down, and I remember hearing her yell this on the way out, "You're public servants. Remember the servant part." My shift ended before I had to see her. I once fired a patient for being an incredible pain in the ass. Details escape me. Years later, after I had moved to a new location, she showed up to make an appointment not knowing I was there. New staff read her chart, "Do not ever appoint this person," and froze up with her in waiting room. They came to ask me what to do, but by the time I had gotten out there she was already being crazy and said very loudly, "I would never come to this place. You are all very rude," and left of her own accord. She basically fired herself the second time. I'm a psychologist, but not a physician. I refuse to treat people all the time. However, by treatment I really mean assessment, as this is what I do, along with some counseling in select cases. I refuse to treat adolescent patients that do not agree to therapy. It's a waste of everyone's time. I also refuse to treat or assess if there is even a hint of an upcoming child custody hearing. Hell no. I worked in a GP's surgery for a while, and I know one of them has transferred at least 3 patients, 2 guys, 1 girl, for declaring their love for her. Also a couple of ridiculously violent people, usually pain pill seekers, get kicked out. Bear in mind this is in a dodgy area of Belfast and half the patients are former/current paramilitary members, so violent means violent. Oh, that reminds me, a different doctor in the same surgery had his coat stolen by a patient, and one of the other patients, who was a paramilitary member, who really liked him, made sure he got it back with everything in it, minus money that had already been spent, and told him the thief patient would never bother him again. So I guess he had a patient refused on his behalf. Yes. People who yell at my staff for no reason at all. People who are clearly drug seekers. We had one guy at the VA who had been seen the previous 3 nights in a row for pain. I pulled his chart. I also pulled his chart from 4 previous VAs he has been to. All the same, I denied him. He then sent his wife in for back pain. I took one look and told her to leave. He then moved on to the next VA down the interstate. One night, I rode my bike home from the hospital. This was in a quiet and small town, and so lived very close to the hospital. I see a couple on the side of the street, arguing. Then suddenly, he starts beating her. She screams and runs into the street to stop a car, but the only car coming along won't stop, so it ends up just being me and that couple. I must have been tired after a long shift, plus the environment is so non-threatening. Small town, summer evening with still lots of daylight, and I completely misjudged the situation. I stop and offer the girl to accompanying her to the only 5-minute walk to get that cut lip taken care of. She hesitates and acts strangely, and I realize she's high the same moment I realize him approaching me. So I'm tall for a woman, but he's a really tall and strong guy. At this point he's swearing at me, telling me how sad my parents will be after he will have beaten me to death with his bare hands. Last moment before he reaches me, I jump on my bike and race away as fast as I could. At home, I called the police to go look after the girl. 2 weeks later, I do the night shift, and guess who's brought in swearing and threatening to kill everyone? Stupid druggy guy. Apparently he took too many sleeping pills and told his girlfriend, who called an ambulance. He then threatened to kill the EMTs, who promptly called the police. Then of course he threatened to kill the policeman, and they brought him to the where everyone like that eventually ends up. I had been so scared when the first incident happened, and I had a visceral response when I saw him again. I really did not want to treat him. But this being a small town hospital, I was the only doctor in the in medicine, and I didn't really have a choice. So I had to examine him. I told the police what had happened before, and they stayed at my side the whole time. I vividly remember having to check his pupils, and looking into his hatter-filled junky eyes made me want to run away so bad. I ended up committing him for being a threat to himself and others. Psychiatry released him 2 days later, and he promptly came back to the when I wasn't there. Another doc committed him again, and psych released him again after 48 hours. It's just how the system worked. Security was shit at this little hospital, and I ended up refusing to do night shifts without better security. As the hospital was very cheap, they found a med student to shadow me. He was 6 feet something, all muscles and an avid kickboxer in his free time. Druggy came back once, had an amicable chat with the med student, and as far as I know never came back. I left the hospital soon afterwards. So yeah, boo for druggy patient, yay for med student who doubles as kickboxer. I was a nurse at a walk-in clinic when we had a patient come in for a spider bite. She had a small swollen spot on her butt and was probably bitten by some common house spider. Definitely not venomous. She wanted the doctor to make it disappear so that she could work that night. She was a stripper and knew that she would make less money with a red swollen bump on her bum. The doctor couldn't do anything, and the patient got angry and started getting loud. She yelled loud enough for the whole clinic to hear. Well, just suck it. She wanted the doctor to suck the venom from her ass. We immediately asked her to leave. After a few minutes of arguing, we had to call the police. TL. Dr. Stripper wanted a spider bite on her ass sucked. Some patients will obviously be difficult to care for, and there are plenty of other doctors in my area. A patient might call and insist on talking with me before making their initial appointment, then not let me off the phone with multiple questions. I'm generally busy trying to get to the next patient. Worse, they will start to disagree with my over the phone answers. This has happened more than once, and I've said to them I'm sorry, but I can tell you would be better off with another physician. At that point, they always back down and talk about how they've heard how wonderful I am, etc. But I'll let them know they need to call somebody else. The first time this happened, I'd been in practice only a short time and had lots of openings in my schedule, so I was very hesitant to do it, but I was very glad that I did and realized I had control over my life and my practice. All the time. I'm on my break on shift right now, and we've already thrown out 2 tonight. Abusive idiots who don't understand they can't just F and blind and get what they want. Every day we throw patients out here because, at least when I'm in charge, you don't get to walk into my emergency department and shout and be abusive and horrible when there are poorly patients and kids who don't want to hear that. I don't care if you don't want to wait, or if you fucked up your stupid foot being drunk. It could be busted to hell and back for all I care. If you're shouting and swearing in my face, you can go away. More doctors need this attitude, I feel. I'm on the other side of this one. When I was in my 20s back in the 80s, I was working for a really shitty factory. I was unloading a truck and pulled a groin muscle, and at first it did not seem too bad, and I just ignored it. One day it really flared up, and I was kind of scared and hurting, so I went to a local clinic, and at admitting I was asked if it was work related and said yes, and the admitting lady stared at me as if I had 2 heads. I went in to see the doctor and told him what was wrong, and the arsehole said you can't sue your company, you can go back to work tomorrow, and that was it. No explanation of what was wrong or any attempt at help, all delivered with a dismissive and contemptuous voice. At the time I was young and dumb and pretty used to being treated like crap at home and at work, so I just left and accepted that as my fate. I have matured a lot since then and don't take that shit anymore. I had a doc discharge/refuse me once. I was 16 and he was my neurologist for my epilepsy. I had only seen him a couple of times. My parents, divorced, were fighting over who would pay for my doctor visits, and so I wasn't able to see him as often as I was supposed to. He told me I was irresponsible and I should try harder. Dick. Despite being thought of as having to do whatever the doc says, pharmacists have quite a bit of leeway in dispensing. I've had people refuse to leave, even when closing. People scream and swear and use racist comments. People shit on the floor of the bathroom and just plain try to snatch it out of my hand. One went outside, got in his car, came through the drive-thru, and asked if this was bulletproof glass. I had no idea, but promptly answered yes. This is also the other side of the coin, but as a teen, in the 90s, I was particularly entrenched in the whole grunge/punk look. I had terrible problems with ovarian cysts and had ongoing medical treatment for it. At one point I was sent for an ultrasound, and the tech performing it started berating me, saying your pain is obviously from all of the scar tissue here from your abortion, and kept making comments of the like. I was 16, in pain, and was horrified by what this man was saying to me. I had never had an abortion. I realized later that he had made assumptions because of how I was dressed, and realized just how shitty people can be sometimes. Often, in the ED or hospital you can't refuse them. Sometimes I give the appropriate care which is not equal to what they want, i.e. narcotics, benzos, tons of tests. In the clinic, we fire a lot of people. Too many no-shows, fired. Cuss out the front desk and threaten them, fired. I had a patient come to see me today after being with another doc I know well. He wants more oxycontin. The other doc only gives him $30 a month. He is suffering on that. I told him I would take care of him, but I wouldn't be writing for his chronic knocks. He won't be back. I had a patient come and so drunk she couldn't walk, wanting her crowns delivered. We didn't have them. She was rude, so all we did was resmont her temporary crowns. I had another who's an alcoholic and somehow lost her new denture that I delivered for another doctor. She called me a year later upset that she didn't know what she did with them between the time she left the office and got home. I really wanted to ask her if she called the bar she stopped at to see about the lost and found. I just told her we could make a new one for her if she paid. I was a manager at a GP surgery. I've kicked quite a few patients off our list, the majority for abusive, threatening or racist behavior towards my staff, or attempting to defraud the practice. I did however refuse to have a patient attend the practice, insisting that he was only ever seen in his own home. He was a convicted pedophile who'd also been done for sexual assault on a girl the same age as two of my receptionists. He defecated and urinated in the clothes he stood up in, had probably not bathed since 1973, was permanently drunk, and on the one time he drove to the surgery, hit every wall, barrier and car in the car park. Luckily he was recalled to prison not long after he was assigned to us, and was not alive for long after that, having refused treatment for sepsis. Wretched creature. I once went to a doctor with my 4x broken arm, which was operated 3 months before. The titan nails should be removed soon. Me and my mother waited a normal amount of time, but somehow my mom freaked the fuck out, made a massive scene, causing the doctor to kick me and her out, refusing any future contact. Well done, mom. Nurse here. Known drug addict patient complaining of headache pain. I offered her Tylenol first and explained that if that didn't work we would offer her something stronger. She started screaming at the top of her lungs that she needed Dilaudid. Actually Dilaudid, but that is what she said. That pills did not work for her and the only thing that helped was Dilaudid. Then she fired me. I was certainly relieved. Vet here. So clients rather than patients. I wouldn't say that I fire clients often, but it has certainly happened before and will probably happen again. Usually it's with people who refuse to comply because they read something online, people who routinely waste your time talking about internet diagnoses, both huge time drains, just not worth the trouble, and people who refuse to have their pets properly vaccinated, posing a danger to the rest of the patients. And of course people with a history of not paying for treatment. We get drug seekers on occasion, but those are presumably rarer than in human medicine. Sort of related. My office phone number is very similar to a pain management clinic's. I had the lovely opportunity to answer the phone of a very pissed off patient who was being refused service and could not understand that she called the wrong number. I could only imagine what the poor workers their experience with this woman. In the 5 conversations I'd had with her, I was called a lying cunt bitch, she will find where I live her, and have her ex-con boyfriend beat the ever-loving shit out of me, and other various versions of threats of bodily harm and insults. This went on for a week straight before she realized that I wasn't playing a trick on her, that she actually called the wrong number. Psychologist. Not being able to afford the $5 copay on the meds you need that keep you from spending $200 or more when the lack of meds puts you in a hospital, but you can buy premium gas for your car, expensive food for your cats, constantly hoard arts and craft stuff at hundreds of dollars a month. Come back and see me when you display the prioritizing necessary to get your life in order. Otherwise, complete waste of time. I took my daughter to the pediatricians a while back. We were in the examining room waiting on the doctor's arrival. I received a call from my boss at work and answered because she hadn't arrived. The doctor opened the door, saw me on my phone, and rudely told me she'd return when I decided the appointment was more important than my phone call. If it hadn't been an on-base doctor, a major, I think, I would have responded in kind. Instead I bit my lip. I know I wasn't the doctor, but this one refused me for the time I was on my phone. Damn work calls.